polygamy, which is an all-encompassing term that just means having more than one spouse. It can apply to a man having more than one wife or a woman having more than one husband, and there are specific terms that describe each one of those phenomena. But regardless, what's common in the Old Testament to a degree is some men having more than one wife. And there are some pretty well-known Bible characters who had more than one wife. Abraham did, and Caleb did, and David, of course, did. I think he had like 8 wives and 10 concubines. One of his sons, Solomon, he took the prize with 700 wives, which I always jokingly say he was the very first member of the 700 Club, if you've ever watched the 700 Club. And he had 300 concubines, so 1,000 women altogether. There's no way he even knew all their names. It does sound sick. Here Solomon was the wisest man, given wisdom from God, but God had said in the law, many, many, many years before Solomon was even born, when you get a king for yourself, O Israel, don't let him multiply wives for himself. And so Solomon clearly did not use God's wisdom and disobeyed God, but God permitted it. God didn't stop him. So why did God let these men have more than one wife? Well, that's a good question. The scripture doesn't specifically say, so we have to take biblical principles and see if we can extrapolate something elsewhere and apply it to this situation. I think we can safely say from Scripture that it was never God's perfect will for a man to have multiple wives, right? God created Adam, and then he created Eve. He didn't create Eve and Ethel and Emily. He created Eve. So it was clearly one woman, one man from the start, and that was the divine pattern that was set. I think the first guy who had 2 wives was a guy named Lamech, who I think was also a murderer, so didn't get off to a good start there. But other, people had more than one wife. David was a man after God's own heart. Caleb was a guy, who trusted God and entered the promised land and so forth. So, you just can't say everyone who was a polygamist was a mean, ugly person. I think we can also say generally it wasn't God's will, because God calls us to treat others like we want to be treated.
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rucha HaKwadash, and double honors to the elder apostles and the elder bishops as well of Great Millstone. Honors as well to you, brethren, you fellow believers of this truth, and shalom to the elect. Shalom also to you few sisters that's following the truth. So anyway, I want to go, the scriptures that I believe Sirach 12 and 10 in the Apocrypha said, I think it says, never trust thine enemy. So as iron rusteth, iron grows, so is his wickedness. So we know who the enemy is, and clearly this is what they, promote. But even on the left-hand side, with all the other sicknesses that we see going on in the so-called community, they don't seem to have problems with that. They don't make great videos on that stuff that's going on in different types of relationships, if you know what I mean. But that attack on a man and woman relationship, or man and women, men and women relationship. So for whatever reason, he says the Most High is not with polygamy, which polygamy is not even a word. That's just something they made up. If that word was never made up, they would have a fight with trying to not justify men and women having several women. So you got to understand polygamy, not even polygamy, to understand the taking away of polygamy, of the man, one wife syndrome. That all goes back to Egypt as well. When the Egyptians, was it Joseph? We can go to Exodus, the 2nd chapter. There's a lot I want to get into in this video, but I want to just hit the point where, the Pharaoh wanted to put hard bondage on the Israelites, so they couldn't procreate, because they felt that they would join into their enemies and overthrow them. That's how they think today. So you would have had a situation where they were saying, we'll kill every firstborn son. This is why Eve is lifted up and twerking in front of parent plan. You know the whole gist of that. So that it all makes sense of why they set these puppets up to do this. Now, even when you go into history, you go to Jacob, who had, I believe, 4 wives, and started the patriarch of the 12 sons of Israel, the patriarch of the nations with an S, of the Israelites. So if the Most High wasn't with it, why would he allow him to have 4 sons? If the Most High wasn't with it, why would he allow Abraham to have Sarah and then give her to Hagar, right, to give birth, just so Sarah can feel the need to want a child? See, the Lord does everything for a reason. She wasn't jealous of her because Sarah wasn't so much jealous of her in general, is the fact that she had a child, and it made Sarah want a child, if you understand how women think when it comes to paternity. So then Sarah had a child. And remember, Abraham had Keturah as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, and he had, 7, I believe, children out of that. You got to read it. But if it was so wrong, why did the Most High allow that? So now we're going to get into a little commentary. I read a lot of it in the past, so I'm going to try to quote a lot of it so it won't be such a long video. Deuteronomy 17:17, it says, let's go to Deuteronomy 17:16. It says, but he shall not multiply himself horsemen to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt. So this is where you would get the understanding of what 17 is going into. It says, to the end that should multiply horses, for as much as the Lord have said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away, neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. So now if all the women of Israel was righteous and we was all following the right doctrine, how would his heart be turned away from having 5 wives, 10 wives? I'll wait and, maybe somebody post that in the comments, because you're not going to find an answer for that. We're going to go into why it said that, because this was going with King David. King Solomon. Because, what's her name? When it says King Lemuel, which is Solomon, when you read the book of Proverbs, I think 31, she says, my son, give not thy strength to women, because women destroy kings. Why was she saying that? Let's go to 1 Kings 11. See, we're studied in this stuff, man. You're not going to confound us. And furthermore, look at the woman today. Look at Eve today, man. You got one, you might be in trouble. Paul said, I wish you was as I had none. So it has nothing to do with one particular woman or 10 women. Sure, you're going to have more problems if you got more women in the society that is not following the laws of the Bible. Of course. 1 Kings 11:1. To get the understanding what Deuteronomy is talking about, it says, but King Solomon loved many strange women together with the daughter of Pharaoh, right? Women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Adonians, and the Hittites. So these are all pretty much heathen nations that he loved, women that he loved. It says, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, right? Because you had our people who was, and when you go back to Deuteronomy 17, it was talking about specifically our people following or wanting to go back to Egypt. And we're going to get the commentary on that. And he had 700 wives, right? Princesses and 300 concubines. Here we go. And his wives turned away his heart. It didn't say the concubines. Notice that, his wives. Because what wives were these? These was women he had wives mixed in with the women of the heathen nations. right? And then you had our women who may have subscribed and indoctrinated him from other heathen nations, right? You got to understand how that's how it works. So let's go to the commentary. I'll make it quick. This is the Cambridge Bible commentary. It says, Solomon notoriously did so, multiply wives. His marriages with foreign princesses were for political ends, but introduced heathen cults into Israel. We can see the same thing with Phinehas. Phinehas, in the wilderness, put the javelin through the Jake. He was messing with the heathen woman. I can't remember the nationality. Wasn't because he was laying with the woman, but he had this Jake upheld the idols of the heathen woman just to get it. So really what he did is simped himself out to the heathen woman. This is exactly what Solomon did. He simped himself out to the heathen woman. So this is why it says not to do that. I'm going to try to get a little more on this. It says, if Israel, when dwelling in the land which was given it by the Lord for a possession, should wish to appoint a king like all the nations round about, right? So if you go into the history, our people wanted King Saul because, they wanted a king for Israel. So they appointed Saul because he was tall, right? Because our people, the other nations, erected these tall gods to worship. So they wanted Saul. Saul was tall. And that's why the Lord put the spirit on Saul to go off, right? Because the Lord said he's a jealous power, right? It was to appoint the man whom, it says here, Jehovah Yahweh of God should choose that from among its brethren, from its own people, not a foreigner or non-Israelite. The earthly kingdom in Israel was not opposed to the theocracy, to the rule of Yahweh as king over the people of his possessions, provided no one was made king but the person whom Yahweh should choose. The appointment of the king is not commanded like the institution of judges, because Israel could exist under the government of Jehovah even without an earthly king. It is simply permitted in this case, in the case the need should arise, the regal government. Now, when you keep reading on this, is particularly going into Israel needing a king or wanting to appoint themselves a king, but then our people was, a lot of them wanted to follow the customs of Egypt. And then these kings, when he said don't take up multiple wives and horses, there was nothing wrong with a man having horses. That's like saying you can't have 3-4 cars. But he said don't take them up under the other gods, under the order of other gods, because I am your God of Israel. You can read this in Exodus 20. In 1, it also says, in the first place, he was not to keep many horses or lead the people to Egypt to multiply horses, because Yahweh had forbidden the people to return thither by that way. The notion of modern critics, goes on, it really precludes the time of Solomon in as much as the time then long gone. Okay, it's a lot. This commentary is a very long commentary, but you get the point. I'm going to go to the Barnes commentary. It says multiplication of wives will lead to sensuality and to an apostasy no less fatal to effect than downright idolatry, right? Exodus. See, these commentaries know, right? They know, because this was talking about messing with adopting other nations. Because what happens is, when you start marrying unto wives, you know what happens. You start bringing in, their children, their practices, their money. That's why it says in here, nor your silver and gold, right? And this is why we see here with First Kings with Yahushua, when we say Solomon, when he started marrying them women, you know what happened. If there was other family members, they would all be a practice. Then they would look up to him as a god, and he would feel like a great god, and he would get carried away. Let's go to Timothy 3:2. It's a lot to it, but I just want to try to keep it simple. It says here, a bishop then must be blameless, a husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, good behavior, giving hospitality, apt to teach. Right? So we'll go into that a little bit. This is not, what you think it is. So we'll go into the commentary on that. It says, I'm not going to read all of this. It's a lot to this. It says 101 husband of one wife. It says here, when we ask what did St. Paul mean by these words, we must picture ourselves in the state of society, empire, at the time when the apostle wrote to Timothy an inundation of Eastern luxury, Eastern morals. Let me get to the point so we can get a greater understanding of what this is talking about. I'm going to try to read through this pretty quick. This is the Benson's commentary. It says, an overseer must be blameless in every respect of regard of moral character, since anything which might be amiss and that would tend to bring reproach upon his office and greatly obstruct the usefulness. The husband of one wife, this neither means that the bishop must be married, nor may not marry a second wife. So you got to understand and say a bishop must be blameless and have the husband of one wife. So the way these Christians are thinking, and people thinking that, let's say he doesn't have a wife, so now he has to get married. This is what they do in those churches where they have to show the bishop having a wife. This is where they get that from. And knowing that she may not even love him, or they might get a divorce, right? It says neither may not marry a second wife, which is just as lawful for him to do as to marry the first, and may in some cases be as a bounded duty, right? But whereas polygamy and divorce upon slight occasions were both common among the Jews and heathen, right? It teaches us, see, this is why we're dealing with Western culture here, okay? It teaches us that the ministers of all others ought to stand clear of those sins. This proves that this is the image of the Greco-Roman Empire, because even then when you read on these commentaries, even the Greek church had it where for the Israelites to basically try to marry one woman. But it was still acceptable for us to have more than one wife. It says here that the widow who is employed by the churches teaching the young of her sex must have been the wife of one husband. You see that? This is why when he says a bishop must be blameless and have one wife, but then you don't hear the people running out in these Christian churches saying that a wife must have one husband, right? The apostle could not mean that persons who have married a second time were therefore disqualified for sacred offices. For in that case, a bishop whose wife dies while he is young must lay down his office. You see that? So it's saying here, it doesn't mean necessarily you have to have one wife or don't have a wife at all. In fact, I'm going to just finish it on a commentary because I read different ones. The reason why I said a bishop must be blameless and have one wife, because the only way a bishop would have been blameless if he messed with a woman who wasn't with different men, because the woman in the churches, remember that it was a lot of corruption in the churches. So the men would throw the women away. They didn't want them no more. If the woman said something wrong to him, they would cut him off, right? Some of the women would leave for a better man that didn't want him no more. And then they would go up and hypergamy, as they call it, and get up to the top speaker of the church. That's nothing new under the sun. We hear the stories of one West that our apostles told us about, right? So then the only way a bishop would have been blameless if he didn't try to take on 5, 10 different wives that have been jumped around by 30 different men. That makes him blameless. He can't be blamed for it because now he has one wife. You also read in here, if he had 5 wives when he took the office of a bishop, he couldn't throw off 4 of his wives. He would have to keep his wives. It also saying that, let's say if his wife died young, and he was a young man, doesn't mean he can't take another wife. But this is the confusion with this doctrine. Nobody really goes in the depth and look into the doctrine, look into the history, the commentary, or basically the history of it. Anyway, I hope this lesson was edifying. That's all I have on that. Shalom.